In 1979, a hospital corridor in Detroit became the scene of what appeared to be a tragic but routine medical emergency. Within hours, a substantial insurance payout was processed, paperwork was filed, and the case was quietly closed. No investigation followed, no questions were raised. The death of a 28-year-old nurse named Madison Jackson was officially ruled accidental, and life moved on. But 24 years later, during a routine audit of an unrelated medical clinic, a single misfiled document would surface that changed everything. What had been accepted as a workplace accident was about to unravel into something far more deliberate, far more calculated, and far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Madison Jackson had been working the night shift at Riverside General Hospital for just over 3 years when her life came to an abrupt end on the evening of March 15, 1979. She was known among her colleagues as dependable, thorough, and quietly ambitious. Unlike many of the other nurses who treated their positions as temporary stops before marriage or other careers, Madison had enrolled in continuing education courses and often spoke about advancing to a supervisory role within the hospital's cardiac unit. She lived alone in a modest apartment 15 minutes from the hospital, drove a reliable used car, and maintained a small circle of close friends. By all accounts, she was building a stable, unremarkable life. On the night she died, Madison had been assigned to the intensive care unit, covering for a colleague who had called in sick. The ICU was familiar territory for her, though she typically worked in general medical wards. The shift began without incident. She completed her rounds, administered medications according to schedule, and updated patient charts with her usual precision. Security logs from that evening show her badge accessing various restricted areas throughout the night, following normal patterns for ICU coverage. Everything appeared routine until approximately 2:47 a.m. According to the incident report filed the following morning, Madison had been found unconscious in a supply closet adjacent to the main ICU corridor. A respiratory therapist making rounds had noticed the closet door slightly ajar and discovered her collapsed inside, surrounded by scattered medical supplies. Emergency protocols were initiated immediately. She was transported to the emergency department, but despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead at 3:31 a.m. The preliminary examination suggested she had suffered a severe allergic reaction, possibly to latex or a cleaning chemical she had encountered while restocking supplies. Before we continue deeper into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The official investigation that followed was brief and conclusive. The hospital's risk management team, working alongside the county medical examiner, determined that Madison had experienced anaphylactic shock, triggered by exposure to a concentrated cleaning solution that had recently been introduced to the hospital's janitorial supplies. The solution, designed for deep sanitization of medical equipment, contained several compounds known to cause severe reactions in sensitive individuals. Though Madison had no documented history of allergies, the medical team concluded that fatal allergic reactions could occur without prior warning, particularly when involving industrial-strength chemicals. The insurance claim was processed with remarkable efficiency. Riverside General's liability coverage included provisions for employee accidents occurring during regular duties, and Madison's death clearly fell within those parameters. Her family received a settlement of $3,900,000, a substantial sum that reflected both the hospital's desire to avoid prolonged litigation and the genuine tragedy of losing someone so young. The payout was structured to provide immediate financial relief to her parents and younger brother, who had depended on Madison's steady income to help with family expenses. Within 6 weeks of her death, the supply closet had been reorganized, new safety protocols were implemented for handling cleaning chemicals, and staff received mandatory training on recognizing allergic reactions. The cleaning solution that had allegedly caused Madison's death was quietly discontinued and replaced with a milder alternative. Hospital administrators cited the incident in safety meetings throughout the following year, using it as a reminder of the importance of proper chemical handling procedures. Madison's funeral was attended by dozens of colleagues, friends, and family members. She was remembered as a dedicated professional who had died in service to her patients and her profession. The hospital established a small memorial fund in her name, providing scholarships for nursing students from low-income backgrounds. Her parents used a portion of the insurance settlement to establish a scholarship at the community college, where Madison had completed her nursing prerequisites. For all appearances, a tragic accident had been properly acknowledged, appropriately compensated, and respectfully memorialized. But beneath the surface of this tidy resolution, several details never quite aligned. The respiratory therapist who discovered Madison's body had mentioned in his initial statement that the supply closet appeared unusually organized, with most items neatly arranged rather than scattered as one might expect from someone experiencing a medical emergency. This observation was noted but not investigated further. Additionally, the cleaning solution supposedly responsible for her reaction had been in use at the hospital for over 6 months without any reported incidents among the housekeeping staff who handled it daily. The timing of Madison's death also raised subtle questions that were never formally addressed. She had been scheduled for a performance review the following week, and several colleagues mentioned that she seemed particularly optimistic about her career prospects. She had recently completed additional certification in cardiac monitoring and had expressed interest in applying for an upcoming supervisor position. Her personal life showed no signs of distress or instability that might have contributed to carelessness around hazardous materials. Perhaps most significantly, Madison's medical records from her employment physical showed no indication of chemical sensitivities or allergic tendencies. She had worked in various hospital departments for over 3 years, regularly exposed to latex, cleaning agents, and medical supplies without incident. The sudden onset of a fatal allergic reaction to a substance she would have encountered routinely seemed medically improbable, though not impossible. These inconsistencies were documented in various reports and statements, but never coalesced into a formal challenge to the official findings. The medical examiner's determination was accepted. The insurance payout was completed, and the case was closed. Madison Jackson became another statistic in workplace safety reports, her death serving as a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers faced by healthcare workers. For 24 years, that's where the story remained. The hospital continued operating. Staff members came and went, and the supply closet where Madison died was eventually converted to storage for patient records. Her name appeared occasionally in safety training materials and scholarship announcements, but the circumstances of her death were rarely discussed. The substantial insurance payout had satisfied her family's immediate needs, and they had chosen not to pursue additional legal action or investigation. The passage of time had effectively sealed Madison Jackson's fate as an unfortunate accident, a reminder of workplace hazards that had been properly addressed through improved safety measures and financial compensation. No one involved in the original investigation had any reason to revisit the case. The medical examiner who conducted the autopsy had since retired. The hospital administrators who handled the incident had moved on to other positions. The insurance investigators who approved the payout had processed thousands of similar claims in the intervening decades. What none of them could have anticipated was that a single document, misfiled and forgotten in the archives of a seemingly unrelated medical clinic, would eventually surface during a routine audit in 2003. That document would raise questions that should have been asked 24 years earlier, questions that would transform Madison Jackson's accidental death into the centerpiece of a criminal investigation that would shock everyone who thought they knew the truth about what happened in that supply closet in 1979. The document that would eventually unravel Madison Jackson's case surfaced in the most unremarkable of circumstances. In late 2003, the East Side Medical Clinic was undergoing a mandatory compliance audit required by new federal healthcare regulations. The clinic, located in a converted office building 12 miles from the old Riverside General Hospital, specialized in occupational health services for local businesses. It provided routine physicals, drug screenings, and workers' compensation evaluations for employees across the Detroit metropolitan area. Dr. Clarence Williams, the clinic's medical director, had been tasked with organizing decades of patient files that had accumulated in storage rooms throughout the building. Many of the records dated back to the clinic's founding in the early 1970s, when it had operated under different ownership and served a broader range of medical needs. The audit required that all patient information be properly cataloged and stored according to current privacy standards, a tedious process that involved reviewing thousands of individual files. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, Dr. Williams was sorting through boxes of records from 1978 and 1979 when he encountered a manila folder that seemed out of place. Unlike the standard patient files that surrounded it, this folder was thicker, sealed with medical tape, and bore a handwritten label that read, "Consultation, M. Jackson, Confidential." The folder had been misfiled among routine employment physicals, tucked between records for factory workers and office employees who had received standard medical clearances. Dr. Williams initially assumed the folder contained a consultation report for a patient who had been referred to a specialist, a common practice that often resulted in copies being retained in the originating clinic's files. However, when he opened the folder, he found something entirely different. Inside were detailed medical records, laboratory reports, and correspondence related to a series of treatments that had been administered to someone named Madison Jackson between January and March of 1979. The records were unlike anything Dr. Williams had seen in routine occupational health files. They documented a complex series of experimental treatments involving controlled exposure to various chemical compounds and allergens. The treatments appeared to have been conducted over several weeks, with careful monitoring of the patient's reactions to different substances. Most disturbing were the detailed notes describing progressive sensitization protocols designed to induce severe allergic responses to specific triggers. Each page bore the letterhead of a private research facility that Dr. Williams had never heard of, along with the signature of a physician identified only as Dr. K. Morrison. The treatments were described in clinical terminology that masked their true purpose, but the pattern was unmistakable. Someone had been systematically conditioned to develop fatal allergic reactions to common hospital cleaning chemicals, specifically the industrial-strength solutions used in medical facilities. The final document in the folder was a payment receipt dated March 20, 1979, just 5 days after Madison Jackson's death at Riverside General Hospital. The receipt showed a payment of $50,000 made to K. Morrison Research Associates for consultation services completed as contracted. The payment had been made by cashier's check, drawn on an account registered to something called Midwest Insurance Consulting Group, a name that appeared nowhere else in the medical files. Dr. Williams sat in his office for nearly an hour, reading and rereading the documents, trying to make sense of what he had discovered. The implications were staggering. If these records were authentic, they suggested that Madison Jackson's death had not been an accident at all, but the result of a deliberate medical intervention designed to create the exact conditions that had killed her. Someone had paid to have her systematically poisoned, conditioned to react fatally to chemicals she would inevitably encounter in her workplace. The timing of the treatments aligned perfectly with the weeks leading up to Madison's death. The final session was documented just 3 days before she died, with notes indicating that subject demonstrates optimal sensitivity levels, and protocol completion confirmed. The clinical language couldn't disguise the horrific reality of what had been done. A young woman had been turned into a walking time bomb, primed to die the moment she encountered the specific cleaning solution that had been introduced to Riverside General Hospital's supply inventory just weeks before her death. Dr. Williams faced an impossible decision. The records in his hands appeared to document a murder that had been successfully disguised as an accident for over 2 decades. But the evidence raised as many questions as it answered. Who was Dr. K. Morrison? What was the Midwest Insurance Consulting Group? How had Madison Jackson been convinced to undergo treatments that would ultimately kill her? And most importantly, who had paid for her death and why? The medical records contained no information about Madison's background, her employment at Riverside General, or any motive someone might have had for wanting her dead. They were purely clinical documents that focused on the technical aspects of the sensitization process without providing context about the intended victim or the people responsible for commissioning her murder. The folder had been sealed and filed away as if it were meant to be preserved as evidence, but evidence of what and for whom? Dr. Williams realized that he was holding documentation of what appeared to be a sophisticated assassination plot that had been carried out using medical expertise and insider knowledge of hospital procedures. The precision required to coordinate Madison's conditioning with the introduction of specific cleaning chemicals at her workplace suggested a level of planning and access that went far beyond a simple murder scheme. This was a professional operation that had been designed to leave no trace and raise no suspicions. The discovery forced Dr. Williams to confront the possibility that his own clinic had been used as a front for illegal medical experiments. The folder's presence in his files suggested that someone connected to the clinic had been involved in Madison's death, either directly or as an unwitting participant. The implications for his practice, his staff, and his own reputation were devastating, but he knew that he couldn't simply dispose of the evidence and pretend he had never seen it. Over the following days, Dr. Williams conducted a discreet investigation into the clinic's history during the late 1970s. He discovered that the facility had been owned by a different physician at that time, Dr. Harold Bennett, who had retired in 1985 and died of natural causes in 1994. Dr. Bennett had operated a more diverse practice that included some research activities and consulting work for insurance companies, which might have provided cover for the type of experimental treatments documented in Madison's file. The more Dr. Williams learned about the clinic's past, the more convinced he became that Madison Jackson's death had been carefully orchestrated by individuals with significant medical knowledge and financial resources. The sophistication of the sensitization protocol, the timing of the chemical introduction at her workplace, and the substantial insurance payout that followed all pointed to a conspiracy that had been planned and executed with professional precision. But understanding what had happened was only the beginning of Dr. Williams's dilemma. The evidence in his possession was 24 years old, involving people who might no longer be alive and events that had been legally resolved decades earlier. Madison's family had received their insurance settlement. The hospital had implemented new safety measures, and everyone involved had moved on with their lives. Reopening the case would destroy the peace that Madison's family had found and potentially expose them to new trauma and legal complications. Dr. Williams spent sleepless nights wrestling with the weight of his discovery. The sealed folder sat locked in his office safe, its contents burning in his conscience like a guilty secret. He had consulted with lawyers, researched statute of limitations laws, and even reached out to former colleagues who might have worked with Dr. Bennett during the clinic's earlier years. Every avenue seemed to lead to more questions and fewer answers. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing the clinic's old financial records to prepare for potential legal scrutiny, Dr. Williams discovered a series of monthly payments that had been made to the facility throughout 1978 and early 1979. The payments, listed as research consulting fees, came from the same Midwest Insurance Consulting Group mentioned in Madison's treatment records. Each payment was substantial, far exceeding what would normally be expected for routine occupational health services. Armed with this financial trail, Dr. Williams contacted a private investigator named Sarah Chen, who specialized in insurance fraud cases. Chen had spent 15 years working for major insurance companies before establishing her own practice, and she had developed a reputation for uncovering complex financial schemes that spanned decades. When Dr. Williams showed her the medical records and financial documents, Chen immediately recognized the pattern. Chen explained that insurance fraud in the 1970s often involved elaborate schemes designed to generate large payouts through seemingly legitimate claims. The most sophisticated operations required months or even years of preparation, creating false medical histories, staging accidents, and ensuring that all evidence pointed toward natural or accidental causes. What made Madison Jackson's case particularly disturbing was the level of medical knowledge required to execute such a plan. The investigation that followed revealed a network of corruption that extended far beyond a single clinic or hospital. Chen's research into Midwest Insurance Consulting Group led to a shell company that had been established specifically to funnel payments for illegal activities. The company had been dissolved in 1983, but corporate filings revealed connections to several insurance executives who had later been investigated for other fraudulent schemes. Dr. K. Morrison proved to be even more elusive. No physician by that name was licensed in Michigan during the relevant time period, and the research facility mentioned in Madison's records appeared to have been another front operation. However, Chen discovered that several doctors who had lost their licenses for unethical experiments had been working under false identities during the late 1970s, providing medical services to criminal organizations and corrupt businesses. The pattern that emerged was chilling in its complexity. Madison Jackson hadn't been a random victim. She had been specifically targeted because of her position at Riverside General Hospital, her access to sensitive areas, and her potential value as both a witness and a liability. The medical records suggested that she had discovered something that made her dangerous to powerful people, and her death had been carefully orchestrated to look like an occupational accident. Chen's investigation revealed that Riverside General had been the subject of several federal investigations during the late 1970s, though most of the records remained sealed. The hospital had been accused of billing fraud, illegal drug trials, and improper disposal of medical waste. Madison Jackson, with her meticulous record-keeping and growing responsibilities in the cardiac unit, would have had access to information that could have exposed these activities. The conspiracy became clearer as more evidence surfaced. Madison had been recruited for what she believed were voluntary medical studies related to occupational health and safety. The treatments had been presented as a way to build immunity against common workplace hazards, a reasonable precaution for someone working in a hospital environment. She had been told that the procedures were experimental but safe, designed to help healthcare workers better protect themselves from chemical exposures. What Madison didn't know was that the treatments were specifically designed to sensitize her to the exact chemicals that would soon be introduced to her workplace. The timing had been calculated to ensure that her death would occur during a routine work activity, with no witnesses and no reason to suspect foul play. The substantial insurance payout had been prearranged, ensuring that her family would receive enough money to discourage further investigation and provide financial incentive to accept the official explanation. The sophistication of the scheme required inside knowledge of hospital operations, access to Madison's work schedule, and the ability to influence procurement decisions about cleaning supplies. Chen's investigation revealed that several key hospital administrators had financial connections to the insurance companies that ultimately paid Madison's death benefit. The web of corruption extended through multiple layers of the healthcare system, involving doctors, administrators, insurance executives, and even medical examiners. By early 2004, Dr. Williams and Sarah Chen had assembled enough evidence to approach federal authorities. The case was assigned to Detective Marcus Thompson, a veteran investigator with the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Unit. Thompson had seen numerous cases of medical corruption, but Madison Jackson's murder represented a new level of calculated brutality that shocked even experienced federal agents. The investigation officially reopened on February 18, 2004, nearly 25 years after Madison's death. Thompson's team began by interviewing everyone still alive who had been connected to the original case. Many of the key figures had died or disappeared, but enough witnesses remained to provide crucial testimony about the circumstances surrounding Madison's death and the unusual aspects of the insurance payout process. Madison's family was contacted and informed about the new evidence, though investigators were careful to prepare them for the possibility that their daughter's death had been far more sinister than they had been told. Her parents, now in their 70s, struggled to understand how their daughter's workplace accident could have been transformed into evidence of murder. The revelation forced them to re-examine every detail of Madison's final months, looking for signs they might have missed. The investigation revealed that Madison had confided in a close friend, Denise Washington, about participating in medical research studies to earn extra money for her continuing education. Denise, now a retired teacher living in Atlanta, remembered Madison mentioning regular appointments at a clinic for health monitoring related to her hospital work. Madison had been told that the studies were sponsored by safety organizations interested in protecting healthcare workers, and she had been proud to contribute to research that might help her colleagues. Thompson's team located financial records showing that Madison had received modest payments for her participation in the studies, money that she had used to pay for nursing certification courses. The payments had been structured to appear legitimate, with proper tax documentation and official receipts. Madison had never suspected that she was being systematically poisoned by people who intended to kill her. The medical aspects of the case required consultation with toxicology experts who could explain how the sensitization process had worked. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, a specialist in allergic reactions and chemical sensitivities, reviewed Madison's treatment records and confirmed that the procedures described could indeed produce fatal reactions to specific trigger compounds. The precision required to calibrate such reactions demonstrated sophisticated medical knowledge and extensive planning. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed that Madison's treatments had been designed to create a delayed reaction that would occur only when she encountered the specific concentration of cleaning chemicals used in hospital supply closets. The timing had been calculated to ensure that her death would happen during a routine work activity, with no witnesses present and no immediate medical intervention available. The reaction would be rapid enough to prevent survival, but delayed enough to avoid suspicion about the timing. The investigation expanded to include other hospitals and clinics where similar accidents had occurred during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Thompson's team discovered a pattern of unexplained deaths among healthcare workers who had access to sensitive information or who had expressed concerns about workplace safety and legal compliance. While not all of these deaths could be definitively linked to the same conspiracy, the pattern suggested a systematic effort to eliminate potential whistleblowers. As the evidence mounted, the scope of the conspiracy became apparent. Madison Jackson had been murdered not because of anything she had done, but because of what she might have discovered in her expanding role at Riverside General Hospital. Her death had been designed to send a message to other employees while generating substantial insurance payouts that helped fund the continuing criminal enterprise. The investigation continued to uncover new evidence and witnesses, building toward what prosecutors hoped would be a comprehensive case against the surviving members of the conspiracy. 24 years after Madison Jackson died in a supply closet, believing she was the victim of an unfortunate accident, the truth about her murder was finally beginning to emerge from the shadows where it had been carefully hidden. The breakthrough that would ultimately expose the full extent of the conspiracy came from an unexpected direction. In March 2004, while reviewing old insurance files related to the Midwest Insurance Consulting Group, investigators discovered a pattern of similar payouts that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of healthcare facilities. The payments weren't random. They followed a specific template, targeting hospitals that were under federal investigation or facing potential whistleblower complaints. Detective Thompson's team identified 17 other cases between 1977 and 1983, where healthcare workers had died in apparent accidents shortly after their employers faced regulatory scrutiny. Each case involved substantial insurance payouts, minimal investigation, and the convenient elimination of individuals who had access to potentially damaging information. The victims included nurses, pharmacy technicians, medical records clerks, and laboratory assistants. All had died in ways that appeared accidental, but occurred at moments when their knowledge could have exposed institutional corruption. Dr. Williams continued to serve as a crucial resource for the investigation, helping decode the medical terminology in Madison's treatment records and identifying other physicians who might have been involved in similar schemes. His analysis revealed that the sensitization protocol used on Madison was far more sophisticated than initially understood. The treatments had been carefully calibrated not just to create fatal allergic reactions, but to ensure that those reactions would manifest in ways that appeared completely natural. The process had involved 3 distinct phases. During the initial sessions, Madison had been exposed to gradually increasing concentrations of various chemical compounds, ostensibly to test her baseline sensitivity levels. The second phase involved targeted exposure to specific allergens designed to prime her immune system for overreaction. The final phase had introduced the exact chemical signature that would later be found in the cleaning solution used at Riverside General Hospital. What made the scheme particularly insidious was how it exploited Madison's own sense of professional responsibility. She had been told that the treatments would help her better identify chemical hazards in her workplace, making her more effective at protecting both herself and her patients. The research had been presented as cutting-edge occupational safety science, appealing to her desire to advance her career while contributing to healthcare worker protection. Sarah Chen's financial investigation revealed the true scope of the criminal enterprise. Midwest Insurance Consulting Group had been just one component of a larger network that included multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, and corrupt insurance executives. The organization had operated like a professional assassination service, accepting contracts to eliminate problematic employees while generating profitable insurance claims that helped fund future operations. The payments to Dr. K. Morrison's research facility were traced through a complex web of intermediary accounts that eventually led to a group of former pharmaceutical executives who had been forced out of legitimate companies due to ethical violations. These individuals had established a parallel medical research network that conducted illegal experiments on unwitting subjects, selling their services to organizations that needed certain problems to disappear permanently. Chen discovered that Madison's case had generated far more than the $3.9 million payout to her family. The insurance fraud had involved multiple policies, inflated claims for hospital liability, and fraudulent workers' compensation filings that had netted the conspirators an estimated $12 million in total proceeds. Madison's death had been both a targeted assassination and a profitable business transaction. The investigation took a dramatic turn when investigators located Dr. Patricia Hayes, a former colleague of Madison's who had left Riverside General Hospital abruptly in April 1979, just weeks after Madison's death. Dr. Hayes had been working as an emergency room physician and had been present during the failed attempts to resuscitate Madison. She had since relocated to Oregon, where she practiced family medicine in a small rural community. When Thompson's team contacted Dr. Hayes, she initially claimed to remember very little about Madison's death beyond the basic medical details. However, after being shown copies of the treatment records and financial documents, her demeanor changed completely. She admitted that she had harbored suspicions about Madison's death for over 2 decades, but had never felt safe enough to voice them publicly. Dr. Hayes revealed the final piece of the puzzle that had haunted her for 24 years. On the night Madison died, she had noticed something that didn't align with a typical allergic reaction. The pattern of Madison's symptoms, the timing of her collapse, and the specific chemical signature found in her system had all suggested something far more deliberate than accidental exposure. But when she raised these concerns with hospital administrators, she was told that questioning the official findings could damage her career and expose the hospital to unnecessary liability. Within weeks of Madison's death, Dr. Hayes had received subtle but unmistakable pressure to accept a position at another hospital across the country. The offer came with a substantial signing bonus and a clear implication that staying at Riverside General might not be in her best interests. She had taken the job, moved to Oregon, and spent the rest of her career wondering whether her silence had allowed Madison's killers to escape justice. The federal investigation concluded in September 2004 with the indictment of 11 individuals on charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to insurance fraud and racketeering. Among those charged were 3 former hospital administrators, 2 insurance executives, a medical examiner who had falsified autopsy reports, and several physicians who had participated in the illegal sensitization protocols. Dr. K. Morrison was identified as Dr. Kenneth Morse, a disgraced researcher who had been operating under multiple false identities since losing his medical license in 1976. The trials that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy and its devastating impact on families across multiple states. Madison Jackson's case became the centerpiece of the prosecution's argument, demonstrating how a young woman's ambition and dedication had been exploited by individuals who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to their criminal enterprise. The evidence showed that Madison had indeed discovered irregularities in the hospital's billing practices and had been scheduled to meet with federal investigators just days after her death. Madison's parents, now in their mid-70s, attended every day of the trial proceedings. They listened as prosecutors described how their daughter had been systematically poisoned by people she trusted, how her death had been orchestrated to appear accidental, and how the substantial insurance payout they had received was intended to buy their silence. The revelation that Madison's scholarship fund had been established with money generated through her own murder added another layer of cruelty to an already unthinkable crime. The convictions brought some measure of justice, but they couldn't restore the 24 years that had passed or answer all the questions that remained. Several key figures had died before they could be prosecuted, and others had disappeared entirely, taking their secrets with them. The full extent of the conspiracy would never be completely known, though investigators estimated that dozens of healthcare workers had been murdered using similar methods. Dr. Williams continued to practice medicine, but the discovery that had consumed 2 years of his life left him fundamentally changed. He established new protocols for document preservation and worked with federal agencies to identify other cases where medical records might contain evidence of similar crimes. His clinic became a model for how healthcare facilities could better protect both their patients and their employees from institutional corruption. The case prompted widespread reforms in insurance claim processing, medical examiner procedures, and hospital oversight regulations. New laws were passed requiring more thorough investigation of workplace deaths involving healthcare workers, and insurance companies implemented additional safeguards to prevent fraudulent payouts. The reforms came too late for Madison Jackson and the other victims, but they offered hope that future conspiracies might be detected before they could claim additional lives. Madison Jackson's name was added to a national memorial honoring healthcare workers who had died in service to their profession, though the inscription made no mention of the true circumstances of her death. Her family chose to remember her as she had lived, as a dedicated nurse who had wanted nothing more than to help others and advance her career through hard work and continuing education. The scholarship fund established in her name continued to support nursing students, though it was now funded through donations rather than insurance proceeds. The misfiled document that had started it all was preserved as evidence and later donated to a medical ethics archive, where it serves as a reminder of how easily institutional systems can be corrupted and how long the truth can remain hidden when powerful people have motives to conceal it. The folder that Dr. Williams discovered in 2003 had been sealed and forgotten for over 2 decades, but its contents had ultimately provided the key to unlocking one of the most sophisticated medical conspiracies in American history. 25 years after Madison Jackson died believing she was participating in research that would help protect her fellow healthcare workers, the truth about her death finally emerged from the shadows. The case demonstrated that even the most carefully planned crimes leave traces, that justice can survive decades of concealment, and that sometimes a single misfiled document can transform a forgotten tragedy into a landmark case that changes how we protect those who dedicate their lives to caring for others. Madison Jackson had been murdered for what she might have discovered, but in the end, it was what others discovered about her murder that brought her killers to justice and ensured that her death would serve as a warning to anyone who might consider exploiting the trust and dedication of healthcare professionals for personal gain.